Hello. Well, I don't know if I'll ever release this to anyone except for the person that it's intended for, but I probably will. The challenge is to be vulnerable. And I'm used to being vulnerable in certain ways, but I suppose that I have kept myself a little insulated uh, because there is one thing that I haven't done that I realized today. I haven't done a whole lot of sharing with my spirituality. I suppose I'll start out by saying this series or video in particular, and maybe a series of videos, is called Letter to Cortnie, another beautiful angel uh, who speaks to angels herself and who gave us, me and my husband, the idea for this challenge. But there's one thing that I want to say to Cortnie from the beginning. My angel does know your angel. I've had signs particularly meant for me that has allowed me to see that. And I am happy about that. It pleases me. I'm not one to actually seek for signs. Um, that is something that, like, I stopped doing a long time ago. I didn't need proof anymore about my spiritual life. But the angels kind of like doing that to me. They like giving me proof. I'm like, I even told them, I told you I don't really need proof. And they say, too bad, we're going to keep giving it to you. So, um, but the thing is I've always kept my spiritual life fairly private. It's mostly just my husband. My sister knows a little bit, but the depths of it I've really not shared with a lot of people. Um, I've tried a little bit with doing a video or two, but I don't really haven't found a way to get the outreach yet, and I just keep waiting on one of them, one particular video to just take off and people to be interested in it. And until then, I wait for like the muse, if you will, divining driving force, and I haven't had a whole lot of that actually for physical creativity lately. It's not worrisome. It's just I go through this, where I'll assess and assess and assess, and then I'll have creative bursts that are reflective of what I assessed. The things that I shared about my spirituality were always maybe like a little mysterious. They'd come through my music. If it wasn't directly related to my physical reality in the day, it was always to do with my spirituality, but it was always more in like whatever poetry that I could do, imagery um, that I could do. You know, I don't know if it was the time period. I'm certain partly. Um, me and my husband always thought, especially throughout our college years, that we were born either a little too late or a little too early because we kind of missed out on the hippie vibe. And in college, we were trying to recreate that with like a little kick, with a little more actual spiritual consciousness involved in the material that we were releasing as far as music goes and everything. Because I speak from my heart, even if it's, I'm sorry if if I hit the mic. I speak from my heart, even if it's in imagery. It's always from my heart. I'm not certain that I know how to not speak from my heart. It's something I've been doing a long time, but the point is that our angels know each other. So I will share a little bit because I haven't really had much of a spiritual community. I developed real trust issues, I think, in people being able to guide me, like in the human realm. So I sought out spirit guides, and I did find a couple. It was I did it like the negative side of the ordered system that Christianity had, that at least for me and the people that surrounded me, caused us to judge not only others. Well, we were judging others because we were judging ourselves as unworthy. That this divine, unconditional being would put us in to a place of torment for the rest of our life. I'm not sure how much I actually believed in that, but it was a fear instilled in me because of the what if I'm wrong. But I guess at a certain point, it was like, I don't care if I'm wrong. I'm not going to serve that kind of purpose. I'm still going to put out the love that I felt like Jesua um, wanted from us. I felt like a lot of the stuff that was wanted from us got missed by everyday Christianity and the religion itself. The helping others, the making sure that you're giving them, the people, to the extent that you can, around you, what they need. You're making sure that they have an opportunity to actually live life and experience it as the divine being they are. I mean, I think uh, that my husband and I, we figured that like the closest that we could come to like a description of our religious ideas were that we were deist, which basically is thinking that you're God, and seeking the God within, which I never really stopped believing. I think that at a certain point in my college life, that I had seen a lot of people, yes, they give praise to God, but they also give blame to God. And instead of actually working on what it is that displeases them about their life and figuring out what they can change to get closer to what they want, they expect God to take care of it. They give him the glory and they give him the blame. And it's like, but at some point in my college life, my husband and I determined that we wrote the script ourselves. So there's no one to go to except for yourself to see why you wrote it in the way you wrote it. Anything you like about it, you get to say, yay, me, I'm actually fulfilling something that I wrote. And then, and then you go, well, wow, I wonder why I wrote that. What do I have to learn from that? What would I try to be trying to tell myself or teach myself through this method that was so painful? So I always tried to keep in mind that it originates from me, that everything originates from me. Like, because, there may be people who are really trying to pull your strings, but really you can get to a state where that doesn't happen because you don't actually care. You don't care if their opinion different for you. All you want for them is to feel peace inside themselves, And I found that I guess I don't know if people really understand me back where I'm from, because I had to take a stance, and leave a situation that really wasn't in my best interest and wasn't in my 5D. And I think what they don't understand is that I didn't keep contact with the person, my father, who did it. But from the way I feel is that you become what you are by the people you surround yourself in, the like-mindedness. And I probably would have stayed in touch with Ronald if he'd ever seen my point of view, ever expressed it in any way to me, that he understood that what had happened didn't have to happen, it was wrong. But I was like, well, maybe they don't understand. And since I don't really tell my side of it because I really don't care, that maybe he can talk to all of those people, give them a skewed sense of what happened. But if they really wanted my side of it, they could talk to me. I've never, said that they couldn't. I just, it felt like because the situation felt so bad to me that I would be spreading just nasty stuff out into the world when it wasn't important. What was important was me becoming myself, being more myself. I realized that I had to definitely leave the state of my home birth because it was keeping me. I didn't feel like I could open myself there. There was, as an empath, feeling that constraint, the anger that they drive on, the fear that they drive on, it wasn't good for me and it was making me physically sick. And so when we got here to Colorado, I did something. I'd already been, sorry, I do ramble. I'd already been in contact. The progression started from me believing one. I left the church not believing in anything. I became what I called it, what we called kind of an agnostic, a seeker. I believed in something. I was almost positive, like that there was something, but that I couldn't define it. That and defining it as this daddy God who would punish you wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy for anyone that I saw. So I was like, well, like the thing I did like from Christianity was Jesus, his message, Yeshua, his message, his the love, the helping others, doing unto others what you do, the idea of reflection, like what you do to the least of these, you do to me. And I was like, well, yeah, that's just because they're another one of you right over there. They may have different experiences, but they're from that same source. So we did, we've been believing in that sort of thing for a long time. But my progression in as far as the spirit speaking or whatever was I sought out a guy. I was really looking for Jesua. I really thought that this was a man who was in touch with something that allowed something beautiful to flow through him. And I thought that his whole message was that we could do the same and greater things. Excuse me. So I was seeking him out, but found another first. My first guy, Mirren, well, the Merlin. Yes, the Merlin. The name he gave to me was, it wasn't like all of a sudden there's a disembodied spirit like talking to me. I believed in it. I sought it out because I thought that if I could get that key, then I could talk to anybody who passed on. Now, I had preconceived notions about that, which did stand in my way, speaking to my sister, who had passed on when she was 4. The preconceived notion that she was stuck in that 4-year-old frame, and so that we wouldn't be able to have much of a conversation. Um, but, and that's why it took so long, I think, to talk to her, to hear from her. But it started out, it was it's a strange, I was a seeker, experimenter. I did a lot of research in college just on spiritualism. My sister and I had run across the idea of the Nag Hammadi and the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff like that. And then when I was in college, I started using the computers there at the Morgan Hall. And this was before like computers were readily available in pretty much everybody's household. They were still fairly expensive to have and maintain. And if you live on a modest budget, you didn't necessarily have one, but I had access. And this is before the internet was a whole lot of fast communication. But you could go on there and get a lot of scholarly stuff and articles. And I went and got these spiritual articles. I was seeking, and I came across like rabbis and people from all walks of life and their different views. And what I could see was that there is similar themes in pretty much all of these religious themes about, you know, that you could term unity or touch with the divine, the beings that were lauded were these beings that were like in touch with the divine, people like Jesus, or if you're in another religion, something else. It really, what matters is the sense of unity and the kind of love that could flow through these groups and these people, and how they could help each other learn and grow. And so I didn't trust after falling into like the Southern Baptist religion, where like the focus wasn't necessarily on the 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 overarching theme that Jesso had given to us to help our brothers and to accept them for who they are and to love them as thyself. We weren't even taught to love ourselves. We were taught that we were from sin and that we're sinners from the day that we take our first breath. That we're sinners from the day. It's not a very healthy way to live. I don't mean the concepts of love and all the overarching themes you can find of help and stuff that you find in that literature, but that sense that we are broken from the time we were born. Why would a loving God make people broken to send to hell? I didn't buy it. Either God wasn't loving and unconditional, or that God didn't exist. That God, or if it did, it wasn't really God. It wasn't really God. It was someone seeking vanity. You have to pray to me. You have to give me the glory. And then just understand it's God works in mysterious ways when bad shit happens. You know? So it didn't vibe with the idea of unconditional love for me. The whole idea that this supreme being would send anything that he created into unending torture. And it doesn't work to say it was demons and Satan. He created those as well. The story is he created those as well. So I thought, I need to look upon God in a different way. And that's when we came upon the idea of the source. But the point was to tell you about my first experience. When we moved from a house where a lot of crazy crap happened, it was not a good place to live, to our apartments. The last apartment we had in Alabama in college, I graduated from there. We moved into our last apartment, and when we were moving in, there was another student, had been a student, I guess she graduated or moved on to another college, or was moving to another apartment. I think she was moving out of the city. And because this apartment was actually pretty dope, because it was fairly close to the campus. You could even walk there if you wanted to. You'd have to take a little more time, but you could. So we were moving in as she was moving out, and she had a box of books, and I was a born reader. I don't know if it was just something that would have developed anyway because my mom and my dad were both readers, or if I was sort of tricked into it. My mom, her whole theory was, she's like, I don't care if you guys don't take a nap. You just need to lay down and read then. Just a little quiet. You know, my mom was plagued with headaches and stuff. She had high blood pressure and stuff. But so I think that we got like this big sense of reading from that, because you know, I guess we just sort of got interested in it while we were doing it if we didn't want to sleep. And me and my older sister for sure became really big readers. We've read a lot. I haven't been as big into reading lately because my attention span is not what it used to be. My focus is not what it used to be. Well, let's put it this way. I can focus. I can focus on the things that I'm learning inside of myself, but it's a little harder to focus on the 3D realm. And those sort of things, like holding someone else's story in my head sometimes is a little difficult. Some of that is not, you know, it's not really my fault, if you will. I have a condition. It's called GAD, but I don't really call it that. I just call it a condition, because that's not what I knew it to be when it first happened to me. I didn't know that they had a name for it. I didn't know any of that. But the point of this is to talk about the progression. and that came later. We have we had the books, a bunch of books from her. It was some of it was school related, some of those little notes that you can get instead of reading a book, and then some plays, and then there was stuff on green magic and stuff like that, and just a bunch of stuff. And we took most of it. We took most of that box of books, and one of them I use now. It was and I've used them for years now, but it did take me a while to get used to it. Hold on a minute, I can get that. It is this. It's pretty beat up. It's Ralph H. Bloom's Book of Runes, and it was in amongst the stuff that she gave us. But that took years before I got around to it. This particular book, something weird happened. I was picking all the books up and putting them away, and full disclosure, I've been a stoner, and I experimented with drugs, but this was different. You know the difference between experimenting with drugs and opening your mind and an actual occurrence. And I was probably stoned, but I was a stoner for years, so this was a unique experience. I was holding this book and I was going to put it away, and all of a sudden I felt this buzz. I mean, it's hard. It's like I guess to describe it, I would say it's like having a phone on vibrate in your head, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. I've not been stoned like that before. I've been a stoner for a long time. I've not experienced that before. And I looked down, and I had this thought when I looked down. This is a book about me. And I'm like, weird. And I look at the book cover, and it says 21 Lessons of Merlin. And I laughed, and I looked over at Cecil, my husband, and I said, baby, I had the weirdest sensation. I had the weirdest feeling, and I told him what was communicated by that feeling, because I've been an empath, all my life. And he's like, well, maybe you were. And I'm like, no. And then we got it. No, I'm not. I don't think so. Maybe he was an oversoul. And then we got into the idea of oversouls and all of this stuff, just riffing off of the feeling. And as we were going through some of the books, the Green Magic, and the front of that book, we were discussing some of the concepts. And during that time, I realized that it was a communications of sorts, and that I was getting messages. And then I remembered things about a relationship that I'd had with this being before. And I was like, well, that's weird, but I go with it. And at the time, I wasn't hearing it as words in my head. It was a buzz, and then a feeling of intention, and I didn't see, I don't remember seeing anything, but it was a feeling of the intention of the communication and what was meant. All the other stuff started coming later. Let's see, and then Jesua came in, and I found him, and if you've ever met him, you'll know. You know right off who it is. You just do. It doesn't matter where you are when you meet him. You know right off. Or what you're doing. You know right off who it is. Or at least I did. And then that was the way it stayed. It was me, Jesua Meredith, and me and Cecil discussing, and Cecil developing his own relationship with these beings because he believed in me so fully. But he was the only person I needed to believe, because I was experiencing what I was experiencing in the realm of him. Because we lived together, we were best friends, we were like a unit, and everything that affected me affected him. So I needed him to at least trust me in it. that I wasn't just losing my mind, because those are the kinds of things that, you know, that we were taught to believe, that there wasn't that sort of thing. It was, or if you're in the Christian church and you take their meaning, that it was the devil. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm not going to know the difference between my mom and someone else. I know what she feels like, even if they could use the illusion of her looks. I know what she feels like. And anyway, I was too scared to see ghosts. I didn't really want to see them. uh, so, but my intention was to keep in touch with people that I love, like my grandpa, Arp, who, like, me and my sister developed a very close relationship with him. My grandmother, Arp, her as well, during a time when she was really in need. And we helped stay with her. My grandpa and my sister and I became really, really close. And my grandmother as well, because, you know, she had had a chemical imbalance that caused her to try to commit suicide. And so we were there to help make sure that she didn't get fuzzy by her medicine, think she didn't take her medicine and then take too much. But we developed a really, really close relationship with them. My grandpa would take us to his school. Yeah, we had a bunch of his shirts when he passed, because, you know, he would just give us what he called his outing shirts, but they're really just like plaid shirts. Um, uh, that was very common, you know, for the working class, for mill people. And he called them outing shirts because he would wear the T-strap. He'd wear the T-strap, and that's it. And they were very see-through, but he was a very hot person. So when he was in his home, unless there was a lot of people around, he would just wear those. And then, so he called them, and boxy shorts. But he called them outing shirts, but they're really just plaid shirts. But he called them that because he put them on to go out of the house, so that he was not just sharing everything with everyone, you know, which wasn't, you know, much, you know, arms, hair, like, but but we, those are the people that I were interested in contacting at the time. Like things like crossing over and mediumship was, like, there were shows on, you know, about such things. And while it was interesting, I didn't want to be that kind of medium. I wasn't seeking to contact, you know, get people in contact with their loved ones. I was seeking to, and I know a lot of that has to do with programming as well, and what I felt at the time, because there was, in my research, there was a lot of debunking of some of these puritists, and a lot of, like, there was a lot of charlatans at the time that were setting up things. So it was hard to trust who was right, who was wrong, what was real and what was not. So I didn't really want to be taken as a charlatan. So I didn't share my experiences with many people outside of the people either who shared the experience with me, or like my husband. Either because I shared every experience that I had that was not, that was spiritual in nature with him. You know, when we became friends and then married, which really didn't take long. 6 weeks after we met, we married. But we've been together as best friends forever. Because the thing is I think about my marriage being so stable and strong, you know, and being what it is like, I felt like what I was seeing around me that was a problem with marriage is that people weren't friends. And you can love someone and not have their best interests at heart, really. But someone you've chosen as your best friend, you might have this whole network of wanting them to succeed, and that will help you to keep lines of communication open. And I was like, well, I think that it's too late when you retire to find out that you have nothing in common with the person that you have chosen to be with for the rest of your life. So I was like, we always have to keep something in common. We always have to keep down at least the same road, if not on the same exact path. Like if we don't have the same exact experience, we at least need to understand each other's experience enough to stay unified in our vision for what we want our life to be like. So I started talking to Mirden, and I started talking to Jessway, and then by the time my father-in-law had passed on, I had started hearing and mentally seeing when I heard uh, my 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 father-in-law, the people who pass on, it wasn't just them. I never knew that it would be that, but like when someone that I idolized or thought in depth about, that I liked, that I admired their artwork or I admired them as a person, would pass on. Sometimes I would see and speak to them as well, but they had to have a direct impact on my life. I wasn't just seeking out to just talk to any old body. I'd done that once before. It wasn't really as fun as it seems. um, so my mom, when she passed on, I saw and heard her. My brother, and I always have the thought, or at least as long as I can really remember a conscious thought about those sorts of things, that when you pass, that whole whatever that in your body that would cause a miscommunication was really out of the way if you both came with purity of heart to talk. And so I always talked to spirits too, even when I wasn't getting a response. Like my grandpa, like he knew all about my daily life. After he passed, I got to do it. I know maybe for some people, but here in effort to be really vulnerable, I found when I was bathing to be a very spiritual time for me. So I would talk to my grandfather, never thinking, other people might think this is weird. I was like, he's out of the body. Um, he's not going to be looking at it like that. It's going to be about the communication, the communion, and everything. So I would just tell him about my day because he did like to know. I would tell him everything. I mean, at that point, he became the person that I said things to, besides my sister Dixie, that I said things to that I didn't think I could tell anybody else. Maybe even some things that I didn't think I could tell her, although I could really tell her anything, and I think I did share most everything with my Irish twin. For 11 days, we're the same age. But my sister and I were always like close, and it was sort of like, it's not like she transferred it. We expanded it to Cecil because she wasn't going to be there every day in my daily life anymore, because I was going to here and yon, wherever it was that our life led us, me and Cecil, and I was pretty sure it wasn't going to always be in my hometown. He had goals and things that he wanted to do, and he didn't ask me to marry him first. He asked me to go west with him first. And so we came from Georgia to Colorado, but it was Denver, and I was sick, so it didn't work out. So we went back to back southeast and back to Georgia and Alabama, and then we spent about 8 years in California. And this whole time, the only place I felt free to actually totally open myself to my empathy was California, and that was a pretty difficult situation because of where I was working and the people that lived in the hotel that I lived in. But that I lived in, that I worked in, and also the one I lived in, but more importantly, the one I worked in, there were pedophiles that were housed there by the cops to keep up with them after they come out. A lot of people who were well, it was SRO. I think that's what they called it. It meant that it was low income housing. It was a hotel, but it was a residential hotel. And I was a housekeeper. I didn't really have to clean the rooms until people left, but kept up the showers. I did the rooms where people did leave, and kept up like the hallways and that sort of stuff. Um, because the showers were shared. It was those were a little more like communal living in ways. The one we the one we lived in had a shared bathroom and a shared shower, but they weren't going to change that situation because it was a historical building, so they couldn't actually. They had no elevator. They couldn't actually renovate it. But they did run a hotel in it, and it had a kitchen, and I guess it originally had a kitchen, or got the kitchen before it became a historical building. I don't know. I don't know the whys and wherefores of it, but it was pretty rough for an empath, because there were people down on the luck. But there was the upside that I got to experience all of my spirituality without like feeling like if I were to have a discussion, it would cause people concern over my spirit. Because we were from the class of Christians that if you spoke, if anything spoke to you, which is kind of weird because you're supposed to be able to talk to Jesus and Jeshua, but then they had this other thing that the devil could hide as these beings, and so it's like, but then how am I supposed to talk to Jesus if you don't want me to actually listen to him? If everything I say that is against what you believe is said to be from the devil and not from the man I know, Jeshua. It's like, so I really didn't share it with anyone, but we would have what we call super church with my sister, and we would go through all kinds of ideas, and it was where we talked about spiritual stuff, physical stuff, all of this stuff, and then we'd realize, oh, we just had a moment of super church. But so it's like I got to where I wouldn't like even try to share stuff like that because I was tired of people trying to define my positive interactions with Joshua and Merlin as it was a bad thing. They have preconceived notions of these beings. I was willing to let them present themselves. Well, first of all, I didn't know anything really about Merlin, but that was like I wasn't into that kind of fantasy. Of course, I had heard of him. I kind of knew he was a wizard, but he was a legend. I never expected him to speak to me. But then, so I call him Mirrodin because that was his name when I knew him in the lifetime that I knew him in. And Jeshua is really the way it feels better saying it. It's really the name that I feel something with when I say it. And I don't know if it's just a miscommunication of what Jesus meant to me, or if it's just that I feel more comfortable with that name because it in my head brings up the meaning that I have for Jeshua, because there's so many people who are defining a being that they haven't really got to know. And the only reason I say that is because so many of these teachings in the churches is hindering you being able to hear him, because if he's not mouthing what the preacher says, he's the devil. So I'm not big on religion. I'm really big on materials. I like material, the material, the legends, the mysticism, and that would be anything that I run across that felt right to me, good to me. Whether it be Druidism, which I personally don't think it was a religion. I think it was a system of learning about nature, the world, the physical world around you, and the spiritual world that was also involved in that, and how they interpreted that. And that's personally what I believe. And it was fitting because where we the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa has a lot of Druid oaks. And they're called that because it's, uh, I guess it's at least legendary historical, because I don't remember the research I did on that, but a group of Druids were chased there, and that that they 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 revered those oaks around there, and that they lived around there and did their worship around there, around those Druid oaks, and they got their name Druid oaks for the Druids that had, you know, and that at least is the legend of how the Druid oaks became called the Druid oaks, because they're oak trees, but how they became called the Druid oaks. And we have places like Druid Hill and stuff like that. So apparently, you know, some Druids had once been in that area. Which, funnily enough, would actually make sense if that group had spent time there. A group like his belief system had spent time there, that he might find it comfortable in that area. I don't know, because I wasn't seeking him out. I was seeking out Jesus. I found him first, and then Jesua. And it may be just that the image that the church was portraying where I was from, and the image that I'm more certain that he had, what I was more certain, they like didn't vibe well with each other, and I couldn't get one solid in my head. So he was just a voice, a disembodied voice. I now have more and more images, and that, knowing that everybody contains him, he can speak through any of the angels if he wants, you know, or any image the angels have given to me to speak, which is weird, you know. But I was satisfied as far as like with my communication skills, and like I wasn't really seeking to add to guides or people that weren't like part of my. I wasn't looking outside, but I was doing and had done in Cali a ritual. I was pretty good at it, Cali, but it was given to us by. He's a sort of, I would call him a mystic. He works in, and I can't remember, was it the Jesuit? I can't remember what, a Christian iconography, but he works in Christian iconography. But he gave us a ritual called the Lesser Banishing Pentagram, something like that. And in it, you call the angels, you put a column of light, and you these things like that. And that's all I thought of, I guess, the angels at the time, that they were like I thought of the gods when we would do the Druid rituals, that it was energy that we built up, not like a specific entity, if you will, that we were calling, but an energy that we were reverencing, you know, that giving reverence to, because if you're doing the Will of the Seasons, you know, if you're doing like the Yuletide and stuff, it's energies. I felt like that we were paying homage to. So I wasn't like seeking communication, like where we talk, you know. I was seeking communion. And then we got a strange message in Cali when we went to the there's a park called Balboa Park. Excuse me, my brain just went in a fog. There's a park called Balboa Park, and it may have been before or right as I was getting that ritual, but I hadn't really thought much about angels. Again, when I was doing the ritual, I thought of the angels as energies, even though I think I was sort of picturing them in my head, like in a way, but like in imagery, but like when I did it, but I really didn't think of it as a way, like beings that you could communicate with, you know, like words with, more like a shared energy, communion. And they made me feel safe, especially in Cali when I was working in the building where there was a lot of downtrodden people and people who had, you know, hidden negativity inside themselves, you know. So, I had stopped calling the Angels because we went back to Georgia again, and we were staying with because it whether people realize it or not, they think that the South, and they say this to people because they said it to us, they think that the South is like so little expensive, like so very inexpensive. And yeah, it is if you have money. But the problem with that, where we were living, they don't really want to pay a living wage. They really don't. You know, they kick and scream, paying people what their time is actually worth. And so if you go there and say you have a minimum wage job, even with both of you working 40 hours a week on a minimum wage job, you're not even going to be able to get an apartment out on your own. It's not enough. It's not enough because they don't pay enough in minimum wage. And a lot of those jobs, unless you're heavily trained or know somebody, you're not going to, you're going to get those kinds of jobs, the minimum wage jobs. So, um, so it makes it more difficult. So we stayed with my family. We weren't intending to stay as long. We thought we'd go to Turkey. Plans fell through. We thought we'd go to Sri Lanka. Plans fell through. But I am glad I went back to Georgia because I did get to spend time with my mom before she passed. Even if we didn't really get to communicate much because her heart called pericarditis, and she got it from a virus. A virus attacked her heart, and her heart was weak because she'd had high blood pressure since her late 20s, and off and on. So she was on the highest medication for her blood pressure at the time. Just they couldn't keep it under control. But the wall of her heart was literally tightening and hardening around her heart. So the results were that her blood flow was not getting the oxygen that it needed, and it was like killing her system because it wasn't getting the blood flow that it needed. But there was only two things they could give her: medicine or take her wall off her heart, which was very dangerous because any little fall could possibly cause a rib to go up into that heart and kill her. So she chose the medicine and passed in her sleep. So, but I didn't grieve. I mean, I guess maybe people, I don't know what they think about that. But I didn't grieve. At first, I stopped grieving long ago when I realized they were still here. They're still around. I feel them. They're still here. It just opened yourself to the communication. And like a lot of the fear-based teachings back in the Bible Belt says it's the devil. So you miss out on a lot because you fear the devil. I figure this is something I got from something I was reading too with some of the doctors at the time. Had discovered that when people would say that they hear voices, and but what do they say to you? And if it's positive, hey, good. Hey, you're reinforcing in your head a positive thing. If it's negative, you need to just tell it to shut the hell up, because it's not something you need. It's not something you need. That we've been taught to find ourselves lacking. And I don't care, even if it's not religion, people have been taught it by the whole concept of dog eat dog world. But it's a competition, but in my studies I ran across all of these places, like whether it be like if you're like doing a scientific study about how things actually work together to get things accomplished, like say trees. We get the oxygen from the trees. They take our carbon dioxide. That stuff is poisonous to us, but they need it. And then they give us oxygen in return. It's like, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And if people actually looked at that, they would know that this system is set up to where we're supposed to work with each other for the best, not against each other. And so I was like, ugh, this is one more thing that we would have if I tried to explain my views to these people. They would be praying for me every day, and I don't need them to. I mean, sure, if they want to, but I don't need them to pray for me. Sorry, my cat is got a fur ball, if you can hear. It's okay, T-Man. Yeah. Got it? Finished coughing? Um, but so I kept these things to in a tightly knit unit of people that were already sort of like minded. I and then there was also that whole suffer not disciples that the Druids thought of, and so it was like, well, I don't really have to teach them what I'm learning or express that. I'm not evangelicalizing about it. I'm not trying to bring people into the Druid tradition or, so it's like I'm not trying to create a religion or anything like that. I'm just trying to find for myself as a seeker, a mystic, what is true for me. So what's true for me? Because I think that we are smart enough as people, as spirits, to really figure that out. I think we are smart enough to figure it out. I don't think we always do, because it does take some delving into self, getting to know yourself and love yourself, which I did. And getting on to how I spoke to the angels now, before I even saw your site or saw any of your videos, um, I spoke to the angels. I've been speaking to them a couple, 3 years, I think, before I saw any of your videos. At least 2, if not 3, before I saw it. Well, I've been speaking to the angels almost 5 years now. So, and maybe 2 years ago, I saw your video, your first video, maybe a year or 2 ago. Um, so I spoke to the angels. It, I was having a tough time dealing with. I always had these things that happened to me that I called spiritual things. Sometimes they were very pleasant. Sometimes they were unpleasant, like a growth pain or something. Uh, because I was shedding old ways of thinking, I guess, and sometimes that's painful and brings up a lot of fear. And that was something that I was determined not to live in. I was determined that, one, I was going to give my husband a happy wife, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. So I was going to do the searching inside myself that it took to be happy, right? It's like, what is it that would make me happy for him like that? And he's always wanted me to be strong, like-minded individual. He wanted to, we were co-creators of our marriage, right? We were one unit, and it was important that, like, we learn how to create the best thing to get the best outcome for our marriage and our spiritual life together. Because before, even though, like, I had Christianity, it was a solo project. There was a lot of fear, and fear does not unite. Fear divides, and there was a lot of fear in it, so it was hard to find unity in that. At least for me, it was hard to find unity. So I decided that seeking, and as an empath, of course, I knew I wasn't going to only feel joy, but for that to be like happiness, having fun, being in, like, in harmony, with the mate that we had chosen, each other. That was more important. Not what anybody thought about how we did that, but but what we actually felt, how we actually felt about it. And so we did things a lot differently than a lot of the people would have suggested we do. But, it was our journey, and I'm glad we did it the way we did it. I'm glad we did it the way we did it because I got to be free. Now, I felt less free, even though I still had the same uh, thoughts on life. I felt less free to express them in the South. I didn't want to get into, unless I knew the people. I didn't want to get into philosophical conversations. It would go back to basically me being born of sin, and I don't believe that to be true. We were born of love. Every individual was born of love, not of sin. This light is the light of love, the light that causes life to be, that causes consciousness to be. It's love, you know. So that's not a sin. We make mistakes all the time. That's an archery term, sin. It's to miss the mark. After I learned that, I was, it's like you guys don't even understand the term sin. You make it so fatalistic. But to miss the mark isn't always fatalistic. It's just to be, because I was playing darts recently when we went to do an open mic at Outback, and they had some Outback Saloon. They had some darts, and me and Cecil were playing darts. We were throwing the darts, Lou and I. Throw the darts, trying to figure out what the game actually was, but it was fun. But to miss the mark, you got the bullseye here, and you still miss the mark if you're right here. Like, that means you're close still, and that you make it so fatalistic that you miss the mark. I mean, you could be wide, like throw it totally, have it bounce off, but like, if you get it close, they still call it missing the mark. And it's like, what a way to live. Thinking that you're already a sinner. That there's nothing you can do to make up for sex being the reason that you were born. Like, I don't think that's a problem. But then I don't think that birth is the only reason for sex. And we'll get into that because I always knew that, like, that we were building up energy, me and Cecil, that we could utilize, he and I, in our life to make us the best we were with our sexual communication, if you will. So I was having this thing going on, and I won't go into details yet. Maybe one day I'll do that, but there's a lot. But I was going into the thing, and I always went through spiritual stuff. But this one was a little confusing for me. Well, I think the reason I was panicking was that my condition was coming on. And I don't mean menopause. It was coinciding with menopause, but this wasn't menopause, not as I'd ever heard anybody describe it. My body that was panicking, though. I was feeling weird and out of sorts. And like I said, not like the same as what people menopause, but I thought, I'm going through this weird spiritual thing because there was some spiritual aspects to what was going on. And I'm sitting here panicking about it a little because the chemicals in my brain were changing. And then I hear, well, pause.
Oh, you got on makeup? You doing your video or?
It's not paused yet. Give me a second.